and welcome to South Asia Today, a show that provides you the glimpses of South Asia. I'm your host Yeshi. Here are the headlines. Afghan women protest against headscarf decree by Taliban. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi participates in second Global COVID Virtual Summit. And Indian devotees take holy dip in Ganges on festival dedicated to the river. Let's begin the show. Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa appointed Ranil Vikrame Singhi as new Prime Minister in a bid to restore stability in the island nation, in the midst of a political impasse and stifling economic crisis. This is the sixth time Vikrame Singhi has been appointed to the office. He has never finished a full term and will have the task of arresting the devastating impact of the island's economic downturn. We have a report.
After weeks-long anti-government violent protest, Mahinda Rajapaksa resigned as Prime Minister. Former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe of United National Party took charge. He was defeated in the 2020 general elections in which the Rajapaksas secured a two-thirds majority. Wickremesinghe is currently the only member of parliament from his party. Although he lost the 2020 general elections, the UNP nominated him to legislature on the national list through Sri Lanka's proportional representation system that allocates political parties a certain number of seats based on a total votes polled.
I have taken on a challenge of uplifting the economy and I must fulfill it.
Wickremesinghe said he looks forward to closer ties with India during his term and thanked India for its economic assistance to the country as it tackles the worst economic crisis since independence. India has committed more than $3 billion to debt-ridden Sri Lanka in loans, credit lines and credit swaps since January this year. Sri Lanka's local expressed mixed feelings about their new Prime Minister as the country again lifted the curfew temporarily for a few hours.
අගමැතිතුමා පත් වුණේ 6 වෙනි පාරටනේ රටේ හිටපු පැරණි දේශපාලකයෙක් රටේ මිනිස්සු කියන විදියට යමක් කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා කියනවා. නමුත් මේ මගේ දේශපාලනය මතය තුල නම් මං ඒ තරම් ප්‍රියජන පුජ්‍යලයක් නෙමෙයි රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ.
Religious and opposition leaders criticized the appointment of Ranil Wickremesinghe as Sri Lanka's Prime Minister as it embattled President seeks a way out of the country's worst economic crisis since independence that has sparked widespread protest.
Me Ranil Wickremesinghe හැමදාමත් මේ රාජපක්ෂ පවුලේ ගැලුම්කරු. ඔහු බලය ලබා ගන්නේම ඔවුන්ගේ ආරක්ෂාව වෙනුවෙන්. ඒ වගේම රාජපක්ෂලත් රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහගේ ආරක්ෂකයෙක්. ඒක තමයි පහුගිය අවුරුදු දෙකමාරක් ඇතුළත අපි පෙන්눔 කරමින් තිබෙන්නේ.
Sri Lanka is facing its worst economic crisis since gaining independence from Britain in 1948. The crisis is caused in part by lack of foreign currency, which has meant that the country cannot afford to pay for imports of staple foods and fuel, leading to acute shortages and very high prices.
Moving on to Afghanistan, where the Taliban government has curtailed women's freedom and has not fulfilled the commitments of girls' education and other rights for women. Recently, the Taliban has made compulsory for women to cover their faces in public, a return to a signature policy of their past hardline rule and an escalation of restrictions that are causing anger at home and abroad. We have a report.
When the Taliban took the charge in Kabul in August last year, it promised that women would be accorded every right. However, the ground reality seems incompatible. The Taliban government has ordered women to keep their faces covered in public. It is a return to a signature policy of their past hardline rule.
الحمدلله در افغانستان 99% مردم افغانستان خانم‌ها، خواهرای ما، مادرای ما بدون از اینکه ما گفته باشیم یا نه خودشان حجاب را مراعات میکنند چون مسلمان هستند میفهمند که حجاب مایه عزت آنهاست.
A decree from the group's supreme leader Hebatullah Akhundzada said that if a woman did not cover her face outside home, her father or closest male relative would be visited and face potential prison or firing from state jobs. The ideal face covering was all-encompassing blue burqa, which was obligatory for women in public during the Taliban's previous rule. Most women in Afghanistan wear a headscarf for religious reasons, but many in urban areas such as Kabul do not cover their faces. Meanwhile, women took to the streets, raising voices against the restrictions imposed by the Taliban.
ما میخواهیم به حیث زندگان به حیث اشرف المخلوقات زندگی بکنیم، نه اینکه اسیر و برده واری در کنج خانه در قفس خانوادگی بند باشیم و شوهرمان بره و لقمه نان را گدایی بکنه. ما این روز را هیچگاهی نمیخواهیم.
The Taliban ruled in Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001 after seizing power following years of civil war in the country and imposed many restrictions on women. Again, Taliban is obliterating Afghan women's rights.
فرهنگ خود را تحت نام اسلام تحت نام ایجاد بر زنان افغانستان تحمیل میکنه. از 9 ماه حضور گروه طالب در افغانستان تمامی برنامه‌ها و آجندای گروه طالب مشخصا در مورد زنان افغانستان بوده، برای محدود ساختن زنان افغانستان، برای حذف زنان افغانستان از ساختار سیاسی و اجتماعی.
The Taliban has not only faced intense criticism from Western governments, but also by some religious scholars and Islamic nations for limiting women's rights, including keeping girls' high schools closed. The United States and others have cut development aid and put economic sanctions on the Taliban regime.
Moving on, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi participated in the US-led second virtual COVID-19 summit this week. Modi urged the participants to build a robust global supply chain and enable equitable access to vaccines and medicines. In line with negotiations being held under TRIPS Council, Modi also underlined the Indian stance of waiving vaccine patent for the countries that have struggled to procure enough doses and have lagged behind in immunizing their people.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, on the invitation of US President Joe Biden, participated in the second global COVID-19 virtual summit. Prime Minister delivered his remarks in the opening session of the summit on the theme Preventing Pandemic Fatigue and Prioritizing Preparedness. Prime Minister highlighted that India adopted a people-centric strategy to combat the pandemic and has made the highest ever allocation for its health budget this year. India is running the largest vaccination campaign in the world and has vaccinated close to 90% of its adult population and more than 50 million children. Modi highlighted that as a responsible member of the global community, India would continue to play an active role by sharing its low-cost indigenous COVID mitigation technologies, vaccines and therapeutics with other countries. He also asked the global community to develop a robust supply chain to meet the immediate vaccines needs of people around the world.
We must build a resilient global supply chain and enable equitable access to vaccines and medicines. WTO rules, particularly TRIPS, need to be more flexible. WHO must be reformed and strengthened to build a more resilient global health security architecture.
India also called for World Health Organization reforms and flexibility in trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights or TRIPS for equitable vaccine distribution. As per the proposal, developing countries, which exported more than 10% of the world exports of COVID-19 vaccine doses in 2021, are not eligible for the waiver. The proposed solution also limits the product scope to vaccines with a commitment to decide on the extension of the solution to therapeutics and diagnostics within 6 months from the date of the decisions on vaccines. India also volunteered to play a key role in streamlining WHO's approval process for vaccines and therapeutics.
We also call for streamlining WHO's approval process for vaccines and therapeutics to keep supply chains stable and predictable. As a responsible member of the global community, India is ready to play a key role in these efforts.
The first global COVID-19 virtual summit was hosted by President Biden on 22nd September 2021, where the major economies had committed to extend their cooperation to prevent COVID-induced disaster. A wide fact sheet revealed that the second global COVID-19 summit has gathered more than $3 billion in new funding to fight the pandemic. While there has been a slowdown in the infection rate of the pandemic, experts have warned countries to not get complacent and stay prepared for any situation.
Now we take a look at some happenings in Asia in a segment called Asia Watch.
Thousands of eligible voters in Nepal started queuing outside the polling stations on Friday as the nation head to the polls to elect new local representatives. A total of 17,733,723 voters are eligible to cast their vote to choose a total of 35,221 representatives at local levels. Of the candidates, 355 contesting from different positions from various political parties have been unanimously elected and 35 independent candidates, including 6 contesting from the ward chairman. The Election Commission has set a total of 10,756 polling stations and 21,955 centers across the country to ensure voting rights of the public. A total of 65 political parties out of the total 79 political parties registered with the EC for the poll are contesting in the polls. The voters above 18 years of age will elect their leadership in the election to be held in 753 places, including 6 metropolitan cities, 11 sub-metropolitan cities, 276 municipalities and 460 village municipalities. The May 13 local elections is the second local election since the adoption of the new constitution and the transition of federalism after the promulgation of new constitution in 2015. Thousands of visitors were seen flocking to the Blue House as South Korea's new president Yoon Suk-yeol opened to its public on his inauguration day and relocated to a new office. Known locally as Cheongwade, the former presidential compound in Seoul was opened to the public for the first time in 74 years. Yoon had called the office a symbol of absolute power and said it would be used as a public park and cultural space. Yoon relocated the presidential office to a former defense ministry building in a central district of Yongsan under a $40 million plan, which his predecessor Moon Jae-in criticized as rushed and a national security risk. People living nearby said they had mixed feelings about the move, with 39-year-old local resident Seo Min-woo saying he was worried about possible protests but also expected security in the area to improve at the same time. On his first day in the top job, Yoon held a meeting with aides and appointed 7 cabinet nominees who had passed their confirmation hearings, including finance and defense ministers. He also met with representatives from various countries including the US, China and Japan. Iraqi cinephile Mohammad Dekiel used to frequent cinemas in the capital Baghdad with his friends almost daily, but since the US invasion in 2003, he is mostly confined to a cinema he established in his home. The 55-year-old cinema lover transformed more than half of his house into a cinema hall, opening a window into a history of a once vibrant scene in the capital Baghdad. The country once had 82 cinemas, 64 of them located in the teeming capital. One by one, they closed during the rule of former strongman Saddam Hussein, when the government controlled the selection and importations of film until only 5 remained at the time of the invasion. The insurgency that followed and killed tens of thousands of people made Iraqis afraid of being in public places and crowds. They chose the relative safety of home, where they many have accessed hundreds of satellite channels. Dakyal bought hundreds of movie tapes and cinema reels, which were sold in the street after the invasion, a painful sight for the cinema lover. As well as free screening at home, Dakyal exhibits his equipment at cultural centers and shows old movies to younger generations. A consortium of several Japanese companies is working on a pilot hydrogen supply chain demonstration project in Australia, and Japan started in 2021. Hystra was established in 2016 and focuses on lignite coal buried as unused resource in Australia and developed technology. Several companies are responsible for their specialized field, and Iwatani Corporation, which is one of them, is responsible for the basic operation and management of cargo handling operation. Lignite coal, a low-grade coal, includes high water content and impurities. Because of low calorific value for heaviness, it can spontaneously combust when it is exposed to air. So it has the defect which is unsuitable for transportation and storage. However, the Hystra has succeeded in producing a large amount of hydrogen at low cost by making full use of technology. Hystra developed the liquid hydrogen carrier Suiso Frontier, equipped with a cryogenic pressure storage cargo containment system that maintains temperature of -253 degrees Celsius, so it can transport large volumes of hydrogen efficiently and safely. Hystra is aiming for hydrogen society, in which hydrogen is used as commonly as oil and natural gas. It will contribute to realize green society. This is a humanoid robot that is supposed to work at a high-level space. At an exhibition of industrial robots held in Tokyo, Kawasaki Heavy Industries has attracted attention by developing it as a future robot that works like human outside the factory, not inside. Kawasaki Heavy Industries is developing a system that remotely controls factory robot. Kawasaki's robot technology says it aims to create an environment where both robot and human being can coexist.
India is a country of dynamic culture, and every Indian celebrates these festivals wholeheartedly throughout the year. Paying their homage to Ganga, the most sacred river of Hindus, the festival of Ganga Saptami was recently celebrated in the northern region of the country with religious fervour and zeal. Take a look.
Festivals in India are all about rituals and traditions that revolve around religion and faith. Recently, thousands of devotees celebrated the festival of Ganga Saptami as a symbol of paying homage to Ganga, the most sacred river of Hindus. Devotees took a dip in the river Ganges in a VR of India's spiritual capital Varanasi.
आज गंगा सप्तमी का स्नान करने के लिए और पूजा करने के लिए आए हैं यहाँ पर। बहुत सुंदर है यहाँ पे। यहाँ पर जो व्यवस्था है प्रशासन की बहुत अच्छी है, और यहाँ पे पूजा करने का जो पुण्य है वो इस टाइम पे सबसे अधिक है।
Devotees took a holy bath in a sacred river and worshipped goddess Ganga as they wished for the prosperity and welfare of humankind. In Ujjain city of Madhya Pradesh, devotees organized a yagna or a grand prayer to offer their prayers to Ganga as well as Chitragupt, the Hindu god of keeping records of human deeds. The festival commemorates the descent of river on earth, which is revered as a goddess according to Hindu beliefs.
आज के दिन गंगा जी का जन्म हुआ था, और यहाँ पर आज के दिन जो है दान पुण्य का बहुत महत्व है, और बहुत दूर दूर से लोग यहाँ पर आते हैं। वैसे भी वैसाख महीना है तो लोग यहाँ पर स्नान करके बहुत पुण्य कमाते हैं।
आज के स्नान बहुत महत्वपूर्ण माना गया है, इसलिए हम लोग आए हैं स्नान करने, उनसे प्रार्थना करने अपने जीवन की सुरक्षा के लिए।
As per the Hindu calendar, the festival is celebrated on the 7th day of Shukla Paksh in the month of Vaisakh. Hindus believe that taking a dip in the holy river, all the sins of human are washed off. Almost all Hindu rituals require water of a holy Ganges as it curbs negativity and purifies the body as well as the soul.
It's time for me to wrap up today's episode. We will be back next week at the same time. This is Yeshi signing off on behalf of the entire production team of South Asia Today. Goodbye and take care.